Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer, food maker, or artisan selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast.
I'm Catt White.
And I'm Brijet Myers. We're longtime farmers market managers, educators, and consultants. Today we're going to chat about our home away from home at the market, the info booth.
Aw, the info booth.
Aw.
Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by American Farmland Trust, protecting farm and ranch land and helping foster a new generation of farmers, producing healthy food and a better climate for all of us. Their America's Farmers Market celebration each summer helps spread the word about farmers markets while providing cash prizes to markets across the U.S. Click their logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com and join American Farmland Trust today. Remember, no farms, no food. No farms, no wine. And then how would we get through our market days?
What would you have at your info booth? Just kidding. We haven't had any wine, I swear. Welcome back to Tent Talk, and welcome to the welcome booth, or the info booth, at your favorite farmer's market. Having a central home base at the market helps make your market run more smoothly and makes farmers, vendors, and shoppers feel more welcome.
And it gives the team a place to hide or hang out, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I mean, in between walking the market, keeping an eye on things.
That's right. We're doing our job from the info booth, okay?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, and in fact, we are. There's a lot
Yes.
of important things that happen there.
We certainly are, but I definitely use it to hide out sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. Home away from home.
There are definitely many good reasons to have a welcome booth at your market. I hope everyone has a welcome booth at their market.
Oh, my gosh. I've been to a few markets lately that, well, my actual home market when I'm in Philly has no info booth. It's baffling to me.
Oh, boy.
I can't handle it.
I mean,
I look around for it every time thinking, maybe I just didn't see it before. But nope, they don't have one.
I just got a little twinkling like, that sounds nice. So do you just sit in a chair in the shade and
I guess.
watch things? How
There's
relaxing.
actually no visible manager there most of the time.
Oh, maybe it's one of
very
those markets
interesting
that
to me.
everyone thinks we do. We just pop up
Yeah,
everywhere.
they just put themselves together.
Magic.
I don't know. I'm
Sometimes I feel
confused.
like, you know what, I have a question. Should have asked this before we started recording, but sometimes there's vendors or farmers that are the market manager.
True.
So
That
like
may
they
be
have
what's
their
happening
own
there.
booth. Okay.
I'm thinking that, but there's no farmers or vendors because I shop there pretty religiously and thoroughly.
Mhm.
There are definitely there's no farmer or vendor that has info about the market on their table.
Yeah.
There's no visible means of support. I don't
boy.
understand. And
Oh.
then I was at a market 2 weeks ago, which I shall not name, but in a different city that I was visiting, and there was a beautiful market, and it went down one street, and then it kind of did a T and went down another street, and then way at the back of the T, away from all the other booths, there was a beautiful info booth. It was a branded booth. It had nice merch in it. It was so far from the market.
Oh, no.
And I found it because, of course, I always beeline to the info booth to see what people are doing. But I asked them, so they're kind of hiding you away over here. And the team member that was working it said, well, yeah, during the summer, the booths extend all the way back here. And I'm thinking to myself, it's a tent. You could move it. You could move it in closer to the other booths.
Maybe there's an invisible electric fence and they
Maybe.
can't move.
They can't move past there. I was very
no.
confused
Oh.
because it was a lovely booth. And she did
Yeah.
have plenty of information. But she was
Oh.
just, you'd have to kind of know she was there,
You got to be front and center.
I guess.
We're going to talk about that for sure.
Okay.
So, general info booth purposes.
Right.
So, is it info booth or a welcome booth? It's two booths in one.
That's right. Remember that commercial?
Yeah. I do, actually. Stop pulling me into your generation. But yes, it's both. So we call it both. We've called it both over the years. Information booth, welcome booth, same purpose. And the things that we use our booth for and that I've seen other markets use these kind of booths for is a place for new farmers and vendors, especially like new ones, to check in, or farmers and vendors that just have a question during setup or forget the code to the bathroom or something like that. Like they know a central place to find staff, even though we're wandering around everywhere. They can go to this central location, and one of us is going to be there.
Yeah, somebody will be in the info booth.
Point person. Yep. And then answer questions for shoppers, of course. So many questions.
So
all
many
day
questions.
long.
Yeah.
Manage EBT sales or WIC or Power Produce or whatever kind of programs that you have going on. at your booth for shoppers, and then EBT redemption at the end of the day for farmers and vendors that collected EBT during the day. I know some folks walk around. We do kind of a combo. One of our team members walks around kind of during the day to pick up EBT, and then at the end of the day, everyone brings their remaining EBT down to the info booth for redemption. So
that's really just at the really big market, though,
Yeah,
right? Like on
yeah.
Wednesdays, you're not walking around and collecting, are you? I think it's because it just becomes, at the really big market on Saturday, it becomes such a glut of farmers and vendors at the end of the day trying to redeem their EBT that it makes sense to kind of do it throughout the day.
Yeah, I kind of like both ways because that line at the end of the day just gets so like tedious. And so if someone can, if we have time, sometimes I don't think there's a lot of time to go out and collect it because we have like an inspection happening or we're short staffed for the day or something like that. So it's not every day, but it does help just ease the kind of long line at the end of the day, and then your team gets out of there a little bit earlier. The farmers and vendors can leave a little earlier. So,
but you know, a lot of markets in our area and all over the country, depends on the market, pay a percentage rent.
Yes.
So at those markets, a lot of times you've got that whole lineup to the info booth.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, because all of the vendors have to come report their sales, have their rent calced, pay it at the end of the day.
Yes. Also, things I have questions about. Yes, but yeah, so that would make sense for them to just bring in the EBT all at once at the end of the day when they're doing that processing.
Right.
And get that line. Yeah. So that's also big use for your info booth.
Yep.
Is to have a place for everyone to pay their percentage rate at the end of the day. Also display and sell market merchandise, which we're going to talk about too. And then also to stash your stuff.
That's true.
I know our staff leaves their jackets and bags and all sorts of things about in our booth.
We try to encourage them to not be so much about as tucked away.
Yes.
I mean, that kind of brings us to making your booth beautiful as well as useful because, you know, we don't want it to be a do as we say, not as we do situation. We want to do what we encourage all our vendors to do, which is make our booth really pretty and well organized and appealing to customers.
Yes. I just had a conversation with one of my staff a couple weeks ago because I was standing outside the booth and setting stuff up as opposed to standing inside the booth. And she was like, "Oh, you're standing outside the booth." I go, "Yeah, I always like to walk up to the info booth and pretend like I'm a customer. Like, what does it look like to a customer? Because when you're inside the booth, it looks different." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, good idea."
Yeah, makes sense, right?
So, yeah, you just got to make sure the signs are facing the right way. Because when you're setting up from the inside, you can't really tell, is it make sense? And then also, can I see all of our junk on the ground? So I'm always like tucking things in, and I think my staff makes fun of me and say I'm always tidying the booth, but it does bug me when everyone's like craps everywhere. I'm like, just put it under the table. We have long tablecloths. You can just shove it under there. It's fine.
I was just going to say, you know, I mean, that's why God made long tablecloths.
Yeah, that's
so you
right.
can stuff all your supplies under there.
The purpose,
right?
The purpose of those. Plus, we're like tripping. I mean, when we're all in there, which isn't very frequently, but once in a while, we're like, the whole staff is in the booth and it just gets crowded.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I mean, you know what looks the worst to me, and I see it at a lot of info booths, is your staff is trying to eat.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you know, you're tight on staff or it's just you. And so you're trying to eat in between shopper and farmer questions. And then you've got kind of half-eaten food and drinks and maybe water bottles and all that stuff scattered around. And it's easy from inside the booth to forget how that looks from outside.
Yes, for sure. I mean, that's been kind of a sticking point. We've had a manager before, our dear, sweet Alicia, that was absolutely capital N, capital O to eating anything in the booth ever.
Restaurant background.
She was like, no food out, no snacking in the booth. Everyone leaves to eat. I am a little more casual about that, but I don't like food trash. And I want to make sure if you're eating, there's someone else in the booth so you're not answering questions with your mouth full because I do draw the line there.
And maybe you're facing away.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, the customers don't want to walk up and see you eating.
You're standing in the back of the booth, but again, that's something I do in the booth. So, but you want to make sure you have like a rule about that. Like, what is your rule about that? Make sure, as the main operator, like let your staff and volunteers know how you feel about it.
So while you're cleaning out the clutter and making sure that's not on the table, make sure what is on the table is, you know, your pretty display of merchandise that you might have for sale, your EBT sheets that kind of give people a tip about how that works and that, you know, you swipe at the booth and that you use the script elsewhere and what kind of money different booths take, whether, you know, everybody can take EBT or whether there's folks that can't because they're not grocery or farm. Oftentimes we'll have community info or we'll have like our local edible magazine, some magazine that really relates to either your community or to your farm and food scene. Sometimes we do that. We distribute promotional postcards and things for local events. So when Art Walk is coming up in our neighborhood or Taste of the Community is coming up, we'll have cross-promotional kinds of things that we work with other community organizations. Now, we are kind of careful about that, and we do have a protocol so that not anybody in the whole neighborhood that's got an event or a special coming up can come throw things on our table. We try to limit it to either actual community association-based events that have some connection to raising funds for the whole community, or people that are sponsors. So if somebody wants to do an informational sponsor activation one day at the market, then we'll keep their postcards or whatever on the info booth table the rest of the month. Or if somebody wants to pay to have their ad in the email newsletter and then also have postcards on the table, they can do that. But it would be a slippery slope to just let everybody toss stuff there, because pretty soon you can't see the top of the table.
Yeah, I've seen info booths where they have it in more like organized fashion, kind of like a coffee shop corkboard situation where
cool.
It's like kind of contained. It's in like a tray, or they have a little rack, and it seems kind of hodgepodge special events or things, specials in the neighborhood or whatever. So I think that's fun. Like as a visitor, that's kind of nice to kind of peruse, or a resident that's like, what's going on in the hood? It's nice to have that. I think we don't do that at our markets, I think, because especially on Saturday, it's just like really busy and there's a lot of stuff going on.
And we're a really big neighborhood. I think if you're in a smaller town or a smaller community where there was only so many things going on, there's only one playhouse going on.
Yeah.
Or, we've got just so much stuff you have to figure out a way to limit. I have seen people have those kind of standing spiral card racks next to their booth. Mm-hmm. And that can be fun for people to put informational stuff in from various organizations around the community.
Yep. Just make sure you have a weight on the bottom. Seen those tip over.
True. Big yes on that.
That's kind of also why at our market, because it kind of gets like a wind tunnel at the end of the day. And if we have any papers on the table, they just blow away. And so, it's just like, what's the wind like at your market? Like, what's the weather like? So to make sure everything's kind of tethered down, don't put so much stuff on your table that it's blowing around or falling off during, because also that makes it look cluttery and it's a lot to manage. So
I remember we used to have a kind of a plastic tub of heavy rocks
that
we carried with us. And then we had a vendor that did upcycled things out of bottles, like wine bottles and things. And she made coasters that were actually the bottoms of wine bottles. Remember her?
Is he?
Leslie Tiano, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so those would sit on our various papers and postcards on the table, which was
looks
cool.
Pretty. Yeah. So having information there to promote community things that are happening is a good idea. It helps connect you to the neighborhood, especially if you're a newer market and you want to, you want to have a way to connect with other groups that are in the neighborhood. You can say, hey, do you want to put your flyer on my info booth?
Right.
And it's a nice exchange.
Cool.
So that's good.
Want to make sure you have good banners, so informational banners. And a lot of these things, you just got to think about, what do I tell my vendors are best practices? You want to do the same thing. That's kind of your vendor booth, the info or /welcome booth. So you want to be sure you have a banner that has your market name, probably your location, because people snap photos of it. You want them to remember where to come back to. Your social handles. If you offer EBT, a lot of times you want to put that in a big starburst on your banner. Maybe a QR code that leads to more information. I have to say, there's a marketing guy from some years ago, 15 years ago, that when QR codes were first kind of a popular thing, he had a marketing book. It was like Good Marketing, Bad Marketing. It was a book that you flipped upside down. And there was a line in there about every time you use a QR code, Satan kills a kitten or something like that. It was just stop with the QR codes. And so then they kind of faded away.
Yeah.
But then, especially during COVID protocols, when you couldn't touch anything, you couldn't print menus and what have you, they came back. I kind of think they're back over the top now, in my opinion. It feels like everybody's got a QR code for everything.
There's too many happening.
Too many.
I do still very much find them useful, but I think any business, not just markets, should just put those key QR codes. So we have one that's like scan it to sign up for our email newsletter. And that's it.
Yeah.
And then we have business cards that have our website and stuff on it. You don't need one for your website if you have a little card.
Right.
But I think signing up for the email newsletter, because it's kind of like, go to this weird MailChimp link. And so people are going to like type that in. And then we have one on our A-frame signs for folks to sign up for Vendor 101.
Right.
So that takes them directly to the class information. So I think those two are good. So at your market, maybe you have one for your email newsletter, maybe one for your social handle, or something else that you use that you want folks to go directly to that would be hard to search. I don't think you need it for your website. I mean, maybe for your website to get people there, but just try not to overuse them.
Yeah. And if there's a lot of QR codes on the same page or banner, I think that gets confusing for people. They don't know if they're all the same thing. They all go to the same place. Or if they're each different. Do they have to snap so many? And then how do you save them? Anyway.
Yeah. So kind of keep that in mind. I think with your banner too, we have a custom tent with information on it, but I printed a banner because we were going to do a special event. and our banner was old and gross. So I just printed a new one and put the location and the times, like days and times of our markets in really big print on the banner. That's mostly what it says. And now we just hang it in the info booth. And the amount of people that have come up to our booth has basically like been cut 50% because people would come up and to ask us how long the market's open till to that day. We get a lot of tourists. And so people just visiting and they want to know, do they have time to go get lunch and then come back to the market? So they just come up to us and they go, oh, okay. And I know that they're reading the sign. They just want to see if we're like what time we're open to. So you can kind of save folks, ton of questions and time. I mean, I like to talk to shoppers, but are people just walking by, they know you're open till 2 or that you're open till 7 or, just give them that information because they're not going to always just look up your website to try to figure it out. So
smart.
Put it in their face.
Yeah, good move.
Mm-hmm.
And you do have a custom tent. And, if you can afford a custom tent, that's definitely a wonderful thing. Think about your vendor that has a custom tent and how they stand out amongst all the other tents. It just makes it easier to find. When we're sending setup information to people, we say, look for the bright yellow tent with our logo on it.
Yeah.
That's how you find your info booth. And our original custom tent, we had actually made a deal with, in our case, it was a tent manufacturer.
Yeah.
And we put their logo on 2 sides of that peaked roof and our logo on the other 2 sides. It wouldn't have to be a tent manufacturer. It could be one of your local businesses or something. You could get them to sponsor your tent because that's a very visible item in the market all day, every day. You could also maybe on one side or 2 sides of that peak put 2 or 3 logos of your major sponsors for your market. So there's ways to get that subsidized, and it really is nice to have those high-quality custom tents. They're going to hold up longer. They're going to look pretty.
They look really nice. They look professional. It makes your market look professional. They hold back the rain and weather. And yeah, just getting a good tent is great. And it's such a great bonus for a sponsor. If I was sponsoring a market, that would be great. I'd love to do that because it's in everyone's pictures.
For sure.
And everyone's just staring at it as they walk by. So it's
great. I would
Mm-hmm.
I would hold that for your really biggest, most supportive sponsors.
For sure. Yep.
So even more tips that we typically give to vendors that apply to us too. You want to make sure that your info or welcome tent is staffed during market hours. Now, I know that's really hard. There are some market managers out there that are on their own. They're just doing it by themselves. But, if you have at least one assistant or volunteer or somebody, it's really, people hate an empty tent.
Yeah. And it's hard and it's kind of frustrating for folks, especially if they have like a quick and easy question. That could be a volunteer or maybe like one of your board members. They rotate and it's like you don't have to know everything, but could you sit in here and watch it at least between like this hour and this hour of the market because that's the time when I'm running around and checking on things or to give me a restroom break or something like that as the market manager, somebody in that tent. And if they don't know the precise answer, they can just contact you and give that information to the shopper. You can have information cards out so they can just hand them out. But having a body in that tent, I feel like is really great. You have a teenage kid or something. I mean, like a responsible child, in that booth. Really helpful to not have an empty information booth. It also sets a good example for your vendors and farmers when you say, hey, make sure your booth is staffed, but then your booth is empty. That's,
one of those things.
Yeah.
Show, don't just tell.
Yeah.
I will say if you really are on your own and you can't do that, you have to go out and deal with something on site. You're going to leave your booth. Obviously, you don't want to leave a bunch of merchandise on your table at that point. Maybe have a cute sign that says, be right back. If you need help right now, look for the person in the orange market shirt.
Yeah. You have your little picture on it like, hey, I'm the market manager. I'm running around doing market manager stuff. Like, I'll be right back. Here's a business card if you have questions about becoming a vendor. These are our hours. Like, put some basic info
just some
in
basic
there.
Info on the side.
Like stuff you would put on like your voicemail answering.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
A visual voicemail answer.
Voicemail.
Yep. I like having staff wear uniforms.
Yeah.
As we tell vendors, I like our team to stand up. Do we have chairs in our info booth
We
nowadays?
have stools, so we're at eye level.
Oh, there we go. So we're at eye level.
I love
That's
a stool.
good.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the idea. Stand up. You've got people coming by you and you want to be at eye level to let them know that you're ready to serve.
Yeah. Just like in any booth. Make sure that staff is greeting shoppers and they're trained and familiar with the map and know vendor products. So when folks ask where to find persimmons or pasta or something, they know where to send them. That is definitely like the biggest training thing that I do with our staff is and telling our new staff all the time, like, please walk around. Like, you don't have to sit in the info booth. I want them to walk around because I want them to see which vendor has which products. And so they can get really familiar because that helps them when they are in the info booth to answer those questions. Because, I mean, as any market manager will tell you, I feel like people could walk up and they're like, I was here 3 weeks ago and I got a thing and it was a, can like this and it had green writing on it. And I wasn't sure what it was. It was like a cinnamon sugar thing. You know, it's like they are describing something so obscure. And if you don't know, if you aren't familiar with your vendor's products and like all of their products, then it's really hard to answer those questions. But when you're able to answer it and you're like, oh, that's Dirt Food. They're on the next block up on the left-hand side. They have a green tent. They're so relieved. That's really good business for your vendor, for like them to connect you back to connect your customers back to them. And it just makes the shopper feel like this is a professional place. That,
Right.
like we do have the information. Our tent is right.
You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I've seen people be bedazzled when they have just this. It's like being a librarian. They have just the smallest of hints, and you can point them right to that booth. They're quite sparkly-eyed.
Oh, I love it so much. It's my favorite part when people are like, oh, about 10 years ago, there was a woman here and she did this. And I'm like, I know who that is. She moved to Atlanta in 2012. Like, I have too much information. It gets creepy, but
For sure.
man, I'm like, here's her website. Yeah. So it's really helpful to have your staff do that. And, you know, if they aren't familiar with everybody, and even I am like, oh gosh, does anyone have cabbage yet? I haven't noticed. We can kind of ask each other. I usually ask my social media manager a lot because her job is to go out there and like take detailed photos of everybody's booth and ask a lot of questions. And so she has a lot of information. So I just text in the group chat like, hey, has anyone seen cabbage yet? You know, and someone will say, oh, no, I talked to Mike at JR and he said it'll be here next week or something like that. You know, so then you have an answer for the shopper.
Well, and I think it's important that if your team doesn't know an answer, they don't just say, I don't know. If you're standing in front of a booth that says information and you get somebody that just keeps saying, I don't know, that's super frustrating. So we really train our folks to say, let me find out for you.
Yep.
I mean, sometimes you just don't know. But in that whole group mental file cabinet that you've got between all of you, you know, text into that group text or let them find you, they can get the answer typically.
Yeah.
So that's the goal, is to, no, you don't have to know every answer, but be willing to help somebody find the answer that they need.
For sure. And I think you want your staff to feel comfortable being able to group text and say, hey, I don't know the answer to this. And not, you know, as a market manager, sometimes you would be like, why don't you know the answer to that? You should know. But I think it's helpful. Like I text sometimes and I'm like, hey, does this person have this today? Or, you know, is this crop ready or what? I mean, I know a lot more than they do, of course, but it's nice to just be as a team, someone will figure out the information. That should be the whole kind of orientation that your whole team takes. Yep.
The other thing we like to do is train them on our neighborhood, because honestly, when people walk by and they see a booth that says welcome or information, they're pretty sure we're the, Chamber of Commerce booth. They're pretty sure we know everything about our neighborhood.
We're the concierge.
That's right. We're the neighborhood concierge.
Yeah.
So it's helpful if everybody who's in that booth has some familiarity with the neighbors and the shops and the restaurants around you. So we really encourage our team to go walk around the neighborhood, take a break, walk up and down the street, see what new boutique has opened, see what new restaurant is there, wave to the folks that we already know, the shoe repair guy and what have you, so that when somebody has a question, we can point them in the right direction. Taste a Little Italy has been really helpful for that.
Oh, yeah. If there's a taste event in your neighborhood, and we did it in North Park and Pacific Beach, we would always take our whole staff team. We would just buy tickets, and I do this now in Little Italy. I buy tickets for my team, and then we do like a little, you know, group like gathering, you know, so that I take them out. But we get to go to all these different restaurants, and it's such a great way for my team at the market to experience the restaurants, just like a little taste. But they get to see what the vibe is and see what the food is there, talk to the staff for a minute, because so many people come to our booth and say, hey, I just want a slice of pizza real quick, nothing fancy. Or, hey, I'm looking for like a place I can make a dinner reservation on Sunday. I'm here for a couple days or something like that. And so honestly, if you're a restaurant or a shop owner that's listening to this podcast that's near a farmer's market, you should be bringing your farmer's market team a little basket and say, hey, this is what we have. You know, can I answer any questions for you? This is the type of restaurant that we have, you know, a menu or something like that. I mean, I'm a little surprised that people don't like put that together. I send probably 100, I'm not kidding, 100 people to different restaurants and shops in Little Italy every single market, because they're just visiting or not even visiting, but sometimes I'll talk to residents and they'll be like, oh, is this restaurant open yet? Or did they close? Like, they know that we know a lot about what's going on in the neighborhood, as many farmers market managers do, because it's kind of, they need to know which shop is going to tell them to turn their busker music down or don't block my driveway or things like that. So we have to stay really tuned into that. So yeah, it's good to get to know your neighborhood so you're able to answer those questions. Again, even though it's not your job to know everybody's restaurant business, you don't want to say, I don't know.
We need to take this information to out of Tent Talk, where I think there's farmers market people listening, and on to Restaurant Ramble or whatever the podcast is that gets to restaurant owners to say, hey, invite your local farmers market team over for some appetizers and a little hello and a little chat, because they will push people your way.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, it's super helpful.
It's good to make sure that your team knows how you want them to answer the question about, how do I become a vendor here? How do I put up a booth here?
Mm-hmm.
We have such a variation of fees depending on what the saturation level is of a particular category and whether you're a farmer or whether you're an artist and that kind of thing. And because that shifts as the market balance changes, my preference is always to have the staff refer those folks either to Vendor 101 if they've never been in a market, or to our email or our application form on our website, so that, because we've got a lot of information there about what categories are full and what we're taking applications for and that kind of thing. I find that things can kind of get lost in translation if each team member is trying to give their own explanation of how to become a vendor or whether we have space for folks.
Yeah, I think that's really tricky. And it kind of just is something I'm always saying, hey, like, make sure you're not telling people what a booth costs. Because if you say any kind of range, then they email me and they say, oh, Sarah in your info booth said it was $50 and I can start next week. Like, they hear what they want to hear.
Right.
These vendors, potential vendors, which is, what we do. But then I have to say, hey, are you telling people like how much booths cost? And did you say this person could start next week? And they'll say, oh, no, I didn't. It's like, well, something you said landed on this person like that. So it's always better. You can just say, I don't manage vendor applications. That's not part of my job. I work on site at the market. If you have a vendor application question, or you want to see our vendor application, here's the card. That's all you have to say. You can just say, I don't manage that.
Right.
That's okay.
Take a load off yourself.
Yeah, it's fine to say that. And I mean, I feel like for the many years that I worked for you, Catt, at the market, even though I was kind of doing some vendor application processing, I was doing some other stuff, I would say, I don't manage that. I wouldn't say like, oh, I know I have like a knowledge of that. Let me answer some questions. I would just say, I don't know. Because also you're standing in the market booth. You've been there since 4 a.m. There's a lot of stuff going on at the market. Are you even going to say the thing that you want to say to this person? Maybe not, because there's just a lot of action happening. So that's why we have an email. That's why we have an online application. And there's a process to it. So I think really giving your staff kind of like making them feel empowered to just say, oh, I don't manage that part of this business. You're going to have to email or take a look at the application online and you'll get some more information. And that's it. And some people are persistent and they're like, well, how much is that person? And so they can just say, I don't know.
You can get all those answers by emailing.
Exactly.
Yeah, because their priority really needs to be managing the shoppers that are at the market, helping vendors that have an issue that needs to be managed, dealing with EBT transactions, watching for traffic infractions, all the things that are happening around you at the market. That shouldn't be your priority because that can easily be done offline. Exactly.
And I don't want them to say yes to somebody who I'm not going to accept. And I don't want them to say no to somebody that I might accept, or maybe, Little Italy like has a lot of other events. And sometimes those event coordinators are saying, hey, Brijet, if you have somebody who comes in with this, this, and this, could you point them my way? And so if someone comes to the info booth and maybe we wouldn't host them, but then my team is like, no, we don't host that, and they leave, I don't ever get their information. I can't ever pass that on. So it's just make sure your team understands that you just want them to connect with you directly and you'll answer their questions. Right. That's what you're there for.
So much behind the scenes there.
For sure.
Do be careful. It's a great place to hang out, is being in the booth. And we want the booth to be staffed, but we also want the team to take turns being out in the market, learning what's on farmers' tables, like you mentioned. And the other thing is, if you have too many people in the booth, you want to be careful to not be giving the vibe that you're having a party in your info tent and that people that walk up feel like they're intruding when they ask a question or they want to buy a bag. Yeah. And it's easy to do that. We tell vendors this all the time. I know it's nice to have your friends or your family in your booth, but then people feel like they're intruding on your conversation or interrupting you. And of course, that's not how you want your shoppers to feel. Yeah. You want them to feel like you're the person they've been waiting to talk to.
Exactly. And that's hard to do. I mean, I'm totally guilty of that because I'm just having a good time with my staff. Right?
Because we all like each other.
We all like each other so much, and we're talking about something interesting, or we're talking about market stuff. And so I think we kind of forget, like, okay, well, we're talking about what this vendor has for today or whatever. And so we forget, like, oh, yeah, we also need to be, like, facing forward and stuff. So I think it's helpful if you just say that explicitly to your team. Say, hey, in the booth, we need to make sure that we're always paying attention to folks approaching the booth and we don't turn our backs to the front of the booth. I try to always face forward and not turn my back to the side. And also, if one of your staff members is doing that or they're chatting, you feel comfortable just kind of like, sometimes I'll just like touch their shoulders and like guide them to the side. And then and I go, hey, I'm going to answer this question. And not in like a, oh, you're doing something wrong, but just like, hey, could you scoot over so like someone could help this person? So just get really comfortable with that. And, you know, you don't have to make it weird, but it's just like everyone just, our priority is people coming up to the booth during market hours. That's our priority. Don't sit there on your phone, you know, like our social media manager is good about, she sits in the back of the booth and she sits in the booth, but she sits like in the back when she's on her phone and she's posting stuff. So just kind of having that welcoming attitude in your welcome booth.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. So the info booth can be a couple of things. It can be a really good source of marketing if you have merch and such. You know, if you're listening to our next episode, it's kind of all about that. But it's also important just to make people feel welcome and providing the info. That's what makes people feel good, and what makes them come back to your market. That develops a really deep loyalty to the market. Mm-hmm. I noticed that at your market, Brijet, a lot of your team knows a lot of our regular shoppers by name, mm-hmm. and they'll say, you know, how's Jim doing and on the football team this year, and how's your mom doing? I know, she's been struggling. How's it going now? And are you here to pick up juice for your husband that's got a cold? And, you know, they know a lot of people and they know their stories. And that really makes people feel good. And it develops such intense loyalty to markets.
It really is. I mean, we just have to like act like we're Cheers or we're a coffee shop. Like everyone should know each other's name. If you have regular shoppers, you really should be greeting them. Even if you're just saying, hey, good morning, like looking straight at them and saying hello specifically to them. They want to feel welcome. So my team is so good at that. And they know so many things about so many shoppers. We have EBT shoppers that come every week, and my team greets them by name because we have to look at their card and write their information down so they get to know them. And they greet them by name. They ask them, and they'll tell them, oh, yeah, I remember that you were waiting for cherry season. Well, Smith has first of the season cherries. Go check those out. So, it's great. It just makes a good feeling all around.
Really important.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that we tell ourselves, things that we tell our vendors that we should also tell ourselves, don't be breaking down that info booth early. I mean, you're setting a bad example for your vendors. And, I mean, folks need that information right up to the end of the market. You may also have closeout things to do with your vendors and such. Even though it's been a long day and probably everybody's ready to go home, you want to make sure that info booth keeps standing.
So tempting sometimes, but just do what you tell your vendors to do.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
Follow that practice.
That's our version of the golden rule.
Yeah. Yep. And to paraphrase Maya Angelou, I've learned that people will forget what question you answered, people will forget what directions you gave them, but people will never forget how you made them feel. That's what she said, right? A warm welcome at the info booth can overcome a rainy day or a baker that runs out early and keep people coming back to your market week after week.
Thanks for listening today. And big thanks to American Farmland Trust for preserving farmland and celebrating farmers markets every year, and for supporting Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. Become a member and support their initiatives now by clicking the American Farmland Trust logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Thanks for listening to Tent Talk today. Please leave us a review on your podcast app or wherever you listen to Tent Talk. Let us and others know how you're enjoying the podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Tent Talk. Connect with fellow Farmers Market folks in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community, and follow us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros. Find online education and other resources at farmersmarketpros.com. Tent Talk is brought to you by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Tent Talk is hosted by Catt Fields-White and Brijet Myers and produced by Leandra Hayes, with original music by David Mead. Tune in next week for another great episode.